Welcome back to another episode of Hot Takes, where you give me your opinion and I give you mine. Let's get to it. Let's start this off with what could be one of the biggest rentals of all time at the trade deadline. We got here Skubal to the Rays at the deadline. Eye emoji. Now, before we talk about a possible Skubal trade, we got to talk about the Tigers first and foremost. Now, they have been playing better as of late. They're 6-2 in the month of June, but they're still 12 games under 500. Now, granted, it is a terrible American League. Who knows? Maybe they can go on this incredible run to get back into it, just like they did a couple of years ago. But again, you're 12 games under 500. Now, sure, Skubal is coming back very soon, which is amazing. He just had that elbow surgery, which what feels like yesterday. That is crazy. He's going to be pitching this weekend. But at the same time, though, again, for the third time, you're 12 games under 500. So I think the Tigers need to seriously consider this kind of a trade, especially because he is going to be a free agent soon. He would bring back a lot in return, even as just a rental. He could be one of the biggest rentals of all time. You got to think back, CJ Sabathia, 2008, when the Brewers got him, they gave up a monster package just to get a couple of months of CC and then having him in the postseason as well. So I think the Tigers need to seriously consider this. Now, if he were to become available, I would love the Rays to be a destination. Now, sure, the Rays have gotten a little bit cooler over the last month or so, but still one of the top teams in the American League. And could you imagine this rotation with Skubal leading the way in a Game 1 start in the postseason, and then you got Rasmussen, and then you got McClanahan, Nick Martinez having a solid year as well? That would be very formidable, not just in the second half, but in the postseason as well. I think that would be a really good chance for the Rays to win their first ever World Series. I'm just saying. And you got to think about it from the Rays' point of view. They're not going to be big players in free agency. So this is a really good shot to land a guy like this that you're going to have no shot at in the offseason. And that goes for all the small market teams, the Brewers, the Pirates. So I think this is a rare chance for teams like that to acquire a guy like this. And when it comes to the Rays farm system, they got one of the best in the game. So I think they could very well put together a package here. They got 6 prospects in Baseball America's top 100 list. You got outfielder Theo Gillen, right-hander Brody Hopkins. You got a couple of catchers in Caden Bodine and Nathan Fluing, and a couple other position players in Cooper Fleming and Taton Gray. Now, I'm not sure if they'd be willing to part with Theo Gillen. He's one of the top prospects in the game, so I think he's going to be off limits. But could you maybe do something with Brody Hopkins? Well, I'm a little hesitant on that because he is their top pitching prospect. I mean, I don't know. Maybe they feel like the juice would be worth the squeeze, but that would be a lot to give up. He has been very good in their minor league system. But, if not him, maybe you could center a package around one of these other top 100 prospects here, and then you could throw in some other pitching prospects there. You got someone like Anderson Brito. He did go on the IL recently, so I'm not sure how realistic that would be. And then you got some other guys like Xavier Isaac, who has a ton of power upside there. So the Rays, they got a lot of good prospects in that system to be able to work together a package here. And if not the Rays, again, like I mentioned, you got a couple other small market teams here. The Pirates, I think, would be amazing. Could you imagine Tarik Skubal and Paul Skeens in the postseason? Holy cow, what a 1-2 punch that would be. That'd be one of the best 1-2 punches of all time. And the Pirates, they have a good farm system to, I think, put together a good package. And the Brewers, maybe they could do the whole CC Sabathia trade all over again. Almost 20 years later, and wow. And what a rotation that would be. Tarik Skubal, Jacob Misarowski, Kyle Harrison, both those guys having great years, and then Brandon Woodruff is going to be coming back soon. And I'll say it again, I think this is a great chance for a small market team like the Rays, the Pirates, or the Brewers to land someone like Skubal. You're not going to land him in the offseason. He's going to sign a massive contract with the Dodgers, the Yankees, whoever it may be. So those teams aren't going to be in contention. So why not use the strength that you have in your good farm systems to land, a once in a decade, 2-decade kind of a guy in Tarik Skubal. And if one of those teams landed him, I think you'd have a very good shot to go toe-to-toe with the Dodgers in the postseason. Now, do I think one of those teams are going to land him? I don't know, but I think they got a very good shot to do so. Speaking of the postseason, we got this one from Jordan Jackson, 3588. The small ball approach this year by teams like the Rays, Brewers, and White Sox will be more useful in the postseason than relying on the long ball. When facing top-line aces and deep bullpens, Teams will have to create runs by any means necessary. Now, this is a fun one, and we've been seeing a lot more bunts this year compared to last year. In fact, they're up about 5% so far this year. You got a 32% bunt for hit percentage compared to 2025, and we've just been seeing a lot more sacrifice bunts in general. Now, with the teams like the Dodgers, the Yankees in the postseason, you're not going to be able to outslug them if you're one of these small market teams, so you may have to try to outpitch them. So, hey, if you're one of those small market teams, go get Tarik Skubal, for crying out loud, and you're going to have to outsmart them, out-hustle them, and, well, the problem with the Dodgers is they do have one of the best infield defenses, so that might not quite work out the way you want, but I do think it ends up coming into play a little bit more. I think you could see it deciding a couple of games in the postseason, but in the end, though, I do think eventually the cream rises to the top. You're going to have to slug to keep up with these teams like the Dodgers and the Yankees. They're teams with power, and since 2021, if you look at teams that have been winning the World Series, they have ranked top 5 in slugging percentage. In 2021, Braves ranked 5th. In 2022, the Astros ranked 5th. In 2023, the Rangers ranked 3rd. And in 24 and 25, Dodgers going back-to-back, they ranked 1st in 2024 and 2nd in 2025. So I do think you're going to have to hit for some power. And yeah, you're going to be going up against great pitching in the postseason, but time and time again, power has been such a necessity for these World Series winning teams. So again, I do think you will see more small ball, especially from the small market teams, to get creative there to try and win some games. I think you'll see it get upped a little bit, but in the end, I think those teams that are hitting for more power, I think they're just going to have a better shot. But who knows? It's been a wacky year so far. Maybe it ends up being a bigger deal than we think. On to the next one from Big Fish 1199. The Brewers will trade for Skubal and CJ Abrams, making a run all the way to the World Series. Now, I already talked about Skubal, but could the Brewers pull something off for CJ Abrams? Personally, I would love this. Put him at second base where I think he'd be a better fit defensively. Now, you'd have to move Bryce Terang over to short, but he has experience playing shortstop before. He has a better fit at second base, but I think he can get the job done at short. And if you added Abrams to this lineup, I mean, my goodness, you'd have a really good-looking lineup here. And like I just said not too long ago, I think you need a bit more pop in the postseason. And you saw that with the Brewers last year against the Dodgers. They lacked that thump in that lineup, and with Abrams in the year he's having, I mean, this would be a huge upgrade to that lineup. He's hitting 287, on base at a 378, slugging at a 526, WRC plus at a 150, 14 homers, having a great year. Now the question is, would the Nationals want to keep him or trade him? I think there is an argument for both sides here. Now for keeping him, they have taken a good step forward this year. This offense has been great for the Nationals. They've exceeded expectations by a mile. People thought this was going to be, a rebuild year, a bridge year, waiting for those prospects down to the minor leagues to get closer to Major League ready, and you'd be ready in another year or two. But they've taken a good step forward. So you keep him and try to take another step forward next year. But then there's the argument for trading him as well. He's got 2.5 years of control left on a cheap arbitration salary, and with the numbers that he's putting up, you're going to get an absolute haul for the guy. And Paul Taboni, he just took over recently. He's focused on making a great farm system, putting together one of the best farm systems in the game. That was one of the goals that he talked about coming in with the Nationals. And the number 1 pick from not too long ago, Eli Willits, shortstop, he is looking really good in the minor leagues. So maybe they feel like he could be ready sooner rather than later at some point in the next year or two to take over at shortstop for Abrams. So you got a couple of arguments here. Now, if they did want to trade him, I do think the Brewers would line up on a trade very well. Like I said earlier, they got one of the better farm systems in the game, one of the best farm systems in the game. They've been great when it comes to player development, and you could put him at second base. Bryce Terang, you could slide him over to shortstop. Now, Terang is better at second base compared to short, but he's played short in the past. I think he can get the job done there. And then you put Abrams in this lineup. That would be a great looking lineup. And if you went up against the Dodgers yet again, you'd get a little bit more thump, something you lacked in their matchup in the postseason last year in the NLCS. I mean, I think this would be a really good lineup with Abrams in the middle there. I think it'd be a great fit. Again, I think the Brewers have what it takes to get a deal done. Now, would they trade the number one prospect in the game, Jesus Madej? I don't know about that. But could you do something with Luis Pena, who's also a top 20 prospect in the game right now? I think you could work a package around him, do Pena, maybe a couple other position players, a couple other pitchers, whatever it may be. I think they have what it takes to get a deal done. Now, if not the Brewers, I think there's a couple other teams out there that make some sense. We just talked about the Rays with Tarik Skubal. I think they could be a good fit here too. I mean, we just talked about all the prospects they got. I think you could get something done there, and you could put him at second base here. Now, at short, Taylor Walls, he is a much better defender there. You don't want to take him off. But again, second base, slide him over. I think he'd be a pretty good fit, and he'd definitely be an upgrade over Richie Palacios. I feel like the lineup with the Rays is pretty top-heavy, but Abrams really extends it just that much more. So I think he'd be a good fit there. And then you got the Dodgers. Everyone loves to hate the Dodgers, but hey, I think they'd be a fit. I mean, again, put him at second base. Obviously, you got Mookie at short. He's been great there. So put him at second. And with the Dodgers, when it comes to the position of second base offensively, they actually do rank near the bottom this year. They've been great defensively at second base, but with the bats, not so much. You know, they've been going guys like Ha-Seong Kim, Alex Freeland. Now, sure, you got Tommy Edman in the fold there too, but Abrams, could you imagine his bat in this lineup, man? Holy cow. I mean, this would be, you'd have one of the best lineups of all time. You already got just an amazing lineup. Could you imagine Abrams in here as well? But again, I think there is an argument for trading him, but I think there's an argument for keeping him as well. Nationals fans, I'm curious to see what you think. Let me know down below in the comments, because again, the Nationals, they're in contention right now. They are looking good, but you also got to think as well. Like I said, Taboni took over. He wants to create an elite farm system. So let me know, Nats fans, what you think down below. Speaking of the Nationals, let's talk about this one from Speedy Baseball. The Nationals make the playoffs while James Wood steals the MVP. How about the Nationals right now? At the time of this recording, they got a record at 35-34. They're a game out in the wild card race in a tough National League. The Nationals playing great baseball here. Now, before I get to their playoff chances, let's talk about James Wood being an MVP candidate. This guy's an absolute freak, and I definitely think he could be an MVP candidate. We still got a ways to go here, but these numbers are looking great. Hitting .271, on base at a .407, slugging at a .534, 160 WRC plus, 18 homers, a 3.0 F-WAR overall. And in the National League right now, he ranks 4th in Fangraph wins above replacement, 1st in OPS, 1st in WRC plus, 3rd in home runs, and 10th in stolen bases. When you got numbers like that, you're talking about a potential MVP here. Now, let's see how he does in the second half. He did have struggles in the second half last year, and when you think about James Wood, he's not even 24 years old yet. So, I mean, this is a guy who's, he's a freak here, but he is still only getting better. Let's see how he does in the second half. That's going to be a big key for him. But if he keeps this up, I absolutely think he could be an MVP candidate. Now, as for the Nationals' playoff chances, this is going to be interesting. This offense has been great. We talked about CJ Abrams earlier with James Wood. I mean, they got a lot of other guys performing here too. Dalen Lyle has stepped up this year. Luis Garcia having a good year. Curtis Mead has been contributing here. Hopefully Dylan Cruz can start doing a little bit more. But they're getting a lot of guys contributing here in the lineup. But where I do worry about this Nationals team over the course of a full season is the pitching staff, both in the rotation and the bullpen. When it comes to the entire pitching staff, both rotation and bullpen, they rank bottom 10 in ERA and bottom 3 in FIP. Now, Cade Cavalli, there's definitely really good potential there, but, behind him, it's been pretty up and down, minus Foster Griffin. The bullpen has struggled here. So I feel like if you're going to contend in this National League, you're going to have to add something to this bullpen and the rotation for the second half. And I wonder how far they would go there. We just talked about it with Paul Taboni. He really wants to build up this farm system. So would he be willing to give up good prospects at this point to help this team for 2026 when he has his eyes on the future? I'm not so sure. Maybe you could add a piece or two, maybe use guys within the organization that you don't see being with you long term. I could see something like that, but do I see them being big buyers? I really don't. And, we just talked about CJ Abrams being a trade candidate. And again, I made the argument for keeping CJ Abrams, but I could also see them looking to move him as well if they got a haul for him. So I think anything could be on the table with the Nationals at this point, but they have been playing great. Let's see if maybe they could add something to this pitching staff. If they do, maybe they'll have a shot. On to the next one. The Cubs go all in for Skubal and Chapman, trading Shaw, Alcantara, and the whole farm. What the heck is going on with the Chicago Cubbies as of late? They're back to 500 at the time of this recording with a record of 34-34. They were one of the best teams in baseball not too long ago, for crying out loud. Now, the Cubs, I do think, are very talented. I think they got a lot of good bats in that lineup. They're one of the best defensive teams in baseball, but this pitching staff has been an absolute mess. They've had a lot of injuries. Guys are not performing very well. Now, Ben Brown, he's been very good, but other than that, there's been a lot of inconsistencies here. Now, could they pull off a trade for Tarik Skubal? Now, I do wonder, with the Cubs, they got some really good prospects in this system, but I do wonder how well they would line up with the Tigers on a trade. If the Tigers want pitching back in return, I think the Cubs may have a problem here unless they're willing to part, with Jackson Wiggins or even Ben Brown. But why trade Ben Brown at this point? Now, if the Tigers wanted back some good position player talent, I think the Cubs could do well there. So it's going to come down to what the Tigers would want. So I would say wait and see. Now, if not Skubal, could they pivot to guys like Freddie Peralta, Sandy Alcantara, Sonny Gray, Seth Lugo, and Michael Walker? Sure, I could see him doing something like that. I think one of those guys would be very solid for the Cubs. Now, for the bullpen, they've been having some issues here too. They do rank bottom 10 when it comes to Fangraph wins above replacement with relief pitching. And Daniel Palencia, he's been a little bumpy as of late. And they got some other good arms in this bullpen, but they're having inconsistencies here. So could they look to a possible reunion with Aroldis Chapman? I think that'd be pretty fun. But could you imagine adding Chapman to this bullpen with Daniel Palencia as a setup option? That would be diabolical, if you ask me. So I think a reunion with Chapman could possibly happen there. So we'll just have to wait and see. Now, when it comes to trading Matt Shaw, once again, he's having kind of a down year. He's hitting lefties really well, but hasn't fully hit that potential yet from when he was a top prospect not too long ago. So could the Cubs use him in a possible trade? Well, you got to think here with the Cubs. You got a couple of guys hitting free agency soon in Ian Happ and Sai Suzuki, and Shaw, now that he can play the outfield, he could take over one of those spots. So would it be more worthwhile for the Cubs to hang on to him? I think there's an argument there for sure. But if you did get something worthwhile in return, say some cost-controlled pitching that could help the rotation this year and for the next couple of years, I think maybe you could look into that. Now, one idea I had recently was maybe something for Bryce Miller. Now, would the Mariners want to give up Bryce Miller for Matt Shaw? I don't know about that. Miller is pitching great this year. He still has a few years of control left. He's very talented. So I don't know. Would the Mariners want to give him up at this point? I'm not so sure about that. If not Miller, maybe you could do something for Luis Castillo. There's another veteran there because they do have a lot of starters there in the mix, especially with the breakout year Emerson Hancock is having. So again, just more of an idea. Could you do something with Matt Shaw for a pitcher like Bryce Miller out there? Someone, that is cost control for the next couple of years. I think you could look into it. We'll just have to wait and see. But, with the Cubs, like I said, you need some pitching here. It's been an absolute mess, both in the rotation and the bullpen. Skubal would be amazing, but do they line up very well? I'm not so sure. It comes down to what the Tigers are going to want in return. But again, if not Skubal, you potentially have some other good options out there you could look into. But I do think in the end, the Cubs really need to fortify this pitching staff. Staying in Chicago, the White Sox are the biggest buyers at the trade deadline. How about the Chicago freaking White Sox? Who saw this coming, that the White Sox would have a better record than the Cubs at this time of the year and leading the division? Coming into the year, I think people thought, yeah, this White Sox team, they just brought in Munetaka Murakami. They got some good young talent there. They'll definitely be better, but this much better? I don't think people saw this coming. Now, like I said, you're leading the division right now, and you got a lot of good young talent here. Colson Montgomery's having a great year. Miguel Vargas having a breakout year. Chase Meidroth, he's solid. Kyle Teal, hopefully he can come back healthy eventually. And Braden Montgomery, one of the top prospects in the game. They just called him up, and he hit a walk-off freaking home run the other day. And now that's making me cry myself to sleep with how the Red Sox are going. Garrett Crochet on the IL. Man, oh man, it just keeps getting worse for the Red Sox. But Braden Montgomery, there's so much power potential in that bat. Jacob Gonzalez, first-round pick not too long ago. He's having a really good year so far. Yeah, even the bullpen is starting to come together here. Sir Anthony Dominguez, he's had some issues with command this year, but he's got good stuff. He's striking out a lot of guys. Grant Taylor has been amazing at the back end of the bullpen. Sean Newcomb, solid veteran back there. So, there's a lot of good things going on, but if there is one area they could shore up, I would say the rotation. Now, Davis Martin, he's having a heck of a year here. He's having a breakout year, easily the ace of the staff, but behind him, it's been a little inconsistent. Sean Burke has been pretty solid, but, veterans like Eric Fetty, Anthony Kay, they've been up and down. So I think they could look into adding to this rotation. There's a few guys out there that can help them out. Now, do I think they're going to be big buyers at the deadline? I would lean more towards no. I think they could definitely add at the deadline, but do I see them getting a big piece out there that would cost you like multiple top prospects? I don't think so, because they are just entering this competitive window. Chris Getz, he's rebuilt the farm system over the last couple of years, so I don't think they're going to go splurging out there by any means. Now, Jeff Passan, he mentioned Reed Detmers as a possible option not too long ago, but he's going to be really expensive. Now, sure, ERA is at a 4, but the FIP is at a 2.87. The metrics look really good with him. Good strikeout to walk ratio. First year back in the rotation after being in the bullpen last year, and he's looked great, really living up to that upside this year. And combine that with the fact that he's got 2.5 more years of control on a cheaper arbitration salary, he's going to be very expensive. And I don't know if the White Sox would line up very well on a trade. Now, could you do some kind of a package with Hagen Smith, Billy Carlson, shortstop prospect they just drafted? I think maybe you could have that conversation, but would the White Sox want to give up 2 top 100 prospects like that? Now, could you do a high volume package centered around Hagen Smith? Maybe, but after their top prospects, their farm does start to thin out a little bit. Maybe you could do like Hagen Smith, Tanner McDougal, and a couple other guys possibly. But, if you're looking at Jaden Fosk, outfield prospect, he's not having a great year in the minors so far. Christian Opper, lefty, not having a great year. So, you really start to thin out after these guys at the top. Bottomer, Montgomery, Schultz, Smith, Carlson, they all have very good value, but it does start to thin a little bit. So I'm not sure if you'd be able to work a package around Hagen Smith. I think you actually can make the argument it's more worthwhile at this point to hang on to someone like Hagen Smith, who has been pitching well in the minor leagues. But again, do I see the White Sox looking to add at the deadline? For sure. I think Sonny Gray would be a really nice fit. He's on that contract. The Cardinals are paying it down a little bit, so it wouldn't cost too much to acquire him. He is going to be a rental. And then, I've talked about Sandy Alcantara as well. You would have him for next year too. He has a club option for 2027. So I think maybe you could look into something like that. It would cost you something, but not as much as, say, Reed Detmers. So I think there's options out there for the White Sox to explore. But again, I do think if you're going to add to this team, it should be the rotation. I say lean into what you got with the lineup right now. Murakami is going to be back eventually after the hamstring injury. Maybe you could add something else to this bullpen possibly, but I think if you're going to add to the rotation. And I'll add this on as well, and I've talked about this before with the White Sox. I could see them, even if they do add, maybe even trading away a couple of guys, because like I said, they've just entered this competitive window. They've rebuilt this farm, and they're still trying to add to this farm. They are ahead of schedule at this point. So, could you use a couple of veterans, say Sean Newcomb, who is pitching well, Austin Hayes when he comes back healthy, veteran guys that could help out some other teams to bring in some young talent for the organization possibly. Heck, even Sir Anthony Dominguez. Could you make that argument? Possibly. But I could see Getz trying to do a little bit of both. But again, I think they should add, and I think they will add. But don't rule out the possibility of maybe trading away someone else and using younger talent within the organization to replace their roles on the team. On to the next one. Luis Arraez, Matt Chapman, and Jung-Hoo Lee all traded at the deadline, and Jung-Hoo Lee top 10 in batting average. Well, up to this point, the Giants have been an absolute disaster. They're 28-41, 8 games back in the wildcard race at the time of this recording. There were a lot of expectations for them coming into the year. They had a ton of talent on this team. This is a team that I thought could easily win a wild card, and here they are near the bottom of Major League Baseball. Now, do I think they're going to have a fire sale? I don't think so necessarily. I think they could look to move a couple of guys, but hang on to all the core guys that they got. Now, Luis Arise, could I see him getting moved? Absolutely. He's on a 1-year deal and having a very good year. I feel like his season is not really being talked about enough. Well, the Giants obviously have been terrible, so that's probably why. But Arise has had a really good year, hitting 327, 361 on base, 441 on the slugging. That's way up from the last couple of years. A guy that's been hitting a lot of singles over the last 2 seasons, but this year he started to get some more extra base hits. So Luis Arise, with a 123 WRC plus, 2.6 F4 overall, yeah, you could definitely get something back for him. So I do think he's going to end up getting moved unless they come up with some kind of an extension. But I think for the Giants, getting some more prospects back into the system would be more worthwhile. Now, do I see them moving on from some bigger contracts like Matt Chapman, Jung-Hoo Lee, even Willy Adames in this conversation? I don't think so necessarily. Unless a team really needed someone like Chapman or Adames on the left side of the infield, or maybe needed an outfielder. But I think for the Giants, when you look at how good the offense has been over the last month, I think that's a good sign for them for the future. The big problem as of late has been the pitching. So if you hang on to most of these guys for 2027, go out there in the offseason, really try to fortify the rotation and the bullpen. I think the Giants, they could bounce back in 2027. Again, this offense has been amazing over the last month or so. Just had a walk-off home run from Bryce Eldridge not too long ago. Rafi Devers has been hitting a lot better too. So I think they'll end up hanging on to these guys. Jung-Hoo Lee having an amazing season for sure. I think this is a guy that could go for a batting title. Luis Arise for sure. I could see him getting moved. Hey, how about the Tampa Bay Rays? We just talked about them earlier for CJ Abrams. That's a team that's making a ton of contact. I think he would fit into what they're trying to do there. I think they could use an upgrade at second base. Now, I think they could use a bit more pop in the lineup, but if they wanted to go another route, maybe Luis Arise as a rental. Now, Robbie Ray, ERA at a 4.42. FIP is almost a full run higher, so I'm not sure what you're going to get out of him for the rest of the year, but maybe a team could take him that needs more pitching in the rotation. I could see something like that. Maybe you could find a taker for Adrian Hauser or Tyler Mahle, not having great seasons, but teams always are looking for pitching, so maybe one of those guys. Or Logan Webb. Now, again, I could see the Giants looking to bounce back in 2027, so with how bad their pitching has been this year, would you want to trade away your best guy? I don't think so necessarily. I think they end up hanging on to Logan Webb, but like I've said a million times, teams are always looking for pitching. He's on a pretty friendly contract that runs through 2028. So if a team blows you away, I think you got to at least think about it, right? Again, try to keep as many core guys as you can, including Logan Webb. But if you get huge offers, Godfather offers that you just can't turn down, I think you got to think about it. But I could see Arise getting moved. Maybe the other guys I mentioned, like Robbie Ray, Hauser, and Mahle as well. But everybody, that's it for this episode of Hot Takes. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. Give me some other hot takes down below. And always be on the lookout for when I post in the community tab on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, for whenever I need hot takes. We are drawing closer and closer to the trade deadline. We're under 2 months away, so we're going to be doing a lot more hot take episodes, so be on the lookout for that. But everybody, that's all I got for right now. If you're kind of the way out, hit the like button, subscribe if you're new. We're trying to get to 60K by the trade deadline. If you can help us out, I'll love you forever. But everybody, that's all I got. I'll talk to you next time.